Welcome back to New Realities. My name is Alan Steinfeld, and each week, every Wednesday, we've been doing a program which highlights some of the aspects of the ET contact experience, and that goes along with a book I've just written called Making Contact. But tonight's guest is another level. It's sort of the level I've been looking for. How do we connect the spiritual component with the actual contact experience? I'm talking to Matthew Roberts, and I'm joined by Henrietta Weekes, David Metcalf, and Carol Turner and Mary Edwards offline, but they'll be coming online soon. But David, you don't have to tell your whole story because you went into such detail before, but can you just outline sort of what happened? You were in the naval intelligence. You saw this thing, this object in the sky, and then sort of your life changed, right? Can you go just highlight some, you went into such excruciating hardships in this phenomena. Maybe you could talk about the moment something shifted for you from the phenomena to the personal experience, and then how it became a sort of initiation. A hero's journey is really what you wrote about. So just start at the beginning for a second, just so we have an orientation to your situation.
All right, sure. So first of all, thanks for having me. I'm
Of
delighted
course.
to be here.
Mhm.
Hello to all of you. Thanks for having me. So the beginning of my story begins when I was, I was stationed on board the USS Theodore Roosevelt in 2015.
Mhm.
And of course, that is what brought us the now infamous gimbal footage that has since been released.
Right. The
I-
tic tac and all that, right? The tic, was it
Yeah.
the,
Well, it wasn't the
okay.
Tic Tac, so it was just the gimbal footage and the
Okay.
Go Fast footage that was from the Theodore Roosevelt.
Right.
So I saw that first back in 2015, and then I transferred to the Office of Naval Intelligence, and that's where I began to have these follow-on experiences with the
But let me
phenomenon.
just ask you, you saw the footage or you actually saw the ships in the sky, the UFOs in the sky?
So I didn't actually see the UFOs in the sky. What I saw was the footage initially.
Uh-huh.
And that was what kind of alerted me to what was happening. And I didn't go outside the skin of the ship and kind of seek this out to see if I could see for myself. Um, so it was the footage that really did it for me, and I had this very kind of emotional reaction to it.
We'll talk about that a little bit because that's sort of what the world, I think, at this moment is coming to. So
Yeah.
you saw the footage that you knew wasn't anything anyone had made and on any place on earth. And how did that shake you up? Why did that shake you? What was so disturbing?
I'm not sure. I don't think it's any one thing that I can put my
Mhm.
finger on, but it was a combination of you know, kind of like, oh my gosh, this is real,
Uh-huh.
and people who have seen these things in the sky, this is really happening. And
Mhm.
so it really just, you kind of have this moment of reflection where you think about, well, what does this mean then? You
Right.
know,
What did it, what shook up your psychology? What did it mean to you?
in the beginning, it really didn't mean a whole lot to me personally. I know that I was having this personal reaction to it,
Mhm.
but I didn't know what it meant. The point at which things began to turn was when the footage was released to the public and the New York Times article came
Mhm.
out, and that's when things started to change in my life.
Why
Uh,
did that change for you? The public acknowledgement of this. What was different about that?
so I think what was different about that was that, I was, because it was now out in the public, it wasn't
Mhm.
something that I could just put away and forget about now. Now
Right.
now it's out there and everybody's talking about it. It's on the news. I'm watching the footage on my cell phone. I've got family members that are asking me about this. So it wasn't something that I could just put away and forget about anymore. I kind of had to explore that now, you know.
So you explored it, but it hit you emotionally somehow, that exploration.
Yeah, it did. I just had this feeling that, I had to kind of get to the bottom of this and figure it out, you know.
Ri-
And I wanted to know what it was all about. There was
Mhm.
something in me that was just very curious, So initially I started digging down into books that people had written on the panel for TTSA, which was like the hunt for the
Right.
Skinwalker, Colm
Right.
Kelleher's book. And I kind of thought that was a little strange, because I thought,
Mhm.
wow, everything that people have said about this is real, you know, and the fact that all of these paranormal events seem to happen
Mm.
around this, and so
Wait, was there any briefing on the naval ship? Like, why were you able to see the footage? And was there any like higher up saying, "Okay, this is real"? Was there anything like that going on?
no, there was, well, not for us, there wasn't any kind of brief. One of my friends who works in another section of intelligence on the ship came into my shop and said, "Hey, check this out," you know, and
Oh,
and so that's how I saw it initially. It wasn't
right.
something that would have necessarily come across my desk, and I never would have heard about it had he not come in
Mm.
and said something.
So you started to read these sort of borderline paranormal books, but then when did the phenomena like strike home? That's the part that's really
Oh,
interesting.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that was, I had this kind of paranormal experience where this book called The Kabbalion just fell in my lap. And
Oh yeah, I love the Kabbalion. The
yeah,
first law, the mind is all and the all is mind. That's
right, right. Yeah.
right.
And actually, when I read that, I thought to myself, how could you know that? How could you ever even prove that? That's impossible.
Right, right.
And so I thought, well, obviously I'm going through some kind of learning experience with this because it was so obvious that this book came to me in a very paranormal and purposeful way that I was supposed to read it. So I thought, well, I'm ready for more.
Were you still in the Navy at that point?
Yes, I was.
Okay. Okay. And
And so that's when I saw the first non-human entity in my room at night.
yeah, describe that because I think Henrietta might be able to relate to this. So yeah, describe what you saw.
Yeah,
If you
so
don't.
I woke up one night in the middle of the night. I was laying on my back. I don't sleep on my back. So I had this I had woken up because somebody grabbed my arm. And
Mhm.
so I noticed my room is starting to go a little blurry, so I wanted to raise my hands and kind of wipe the sleep out of my eyes.
Mhm.
And I was unable to move. And I
Mhm.
thought, oh, what's going on now? This is weird. I can't move. But then I realized there's somebody standing off to my right. So I kind of struggled to move my head in that direction to see what it was. And I saw this outline of like a torso, two arms, and a head just kind of standing over me.
Mhm.
And as I'm watching this golden light starts to light up my room from the back of this entity.
Mhm.
And then that light becomes so blinding, and then it starts to turn into these rays of golden light extending from its head.
You had never seen anything like that before, huh?
No. Well,
Right.
in retrospect, this is kind of what got me on the path to this whole spiritual mythic approach to this, because I thought to myself later after the experience that this looks like religious art that I've seen all over the world.
Right.
And so in kind of unpacking that experience, which ended up with this blue female on top of me, which I'm sure is something that people are very familiar with,
You mean
listening to
on
this.
top of you in the sense of having sex, right?
Yes, right.
Mm-mm-mm.
Yeah, she had blue skin. I could feel her skin was not like normal human skin. It was much thicker,
Mm,
much smoother than normal human skin.
mm,
Um, I could not see her face though; it was blurred out. Her
mm.
whole face was just blurry.
Was it erotic, or were you so more freaked out and saying, "What's going on?"
Yeah, I wasn't necessarily freaked out, but I was thinking to myself, I can't believe this is happening. And I thought to myself, I actually thought at the time, that there must be some kind of craft or something parked in the backyard that she had come here in, you know.
But you could feel her physicalness of
Oh yeah. Yeah, there wasn't a doubt in my mind that this was really happening and that she was really in my room. And how she came to be there, I don't know. You know, I've heard lots of things, how they can float through walls or whatever.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, and when I unpacked that and I started thinking about the significance of that light show, that was when I started thinking, you know, there's a lot more going on here, and this has been going on for a very long time, because it did look like religious art that I've seen from all over the world, you know.
But you did get the sense she was not of this world, extraterrestrial. Is that
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Yeah. I mean, it was clear she was not human. Her skin was blue. It was not like our skin, you know.
Wow. So then that didn't completely freak you out. You kind of adjusted to it, or did you?
Yeah. I was a little freaked out by it. I was initially. And, you know, this kind of dark depression started to set in.
Why
You know?
depression? Why do you think?
You know, so, well, you know, I think that really the depression within this whole experience, I think a lot of people experience it. And I think it's because what happens during depression, I think, is that your neuroplasticity is improved, right? Your brain is working on your neuroplasticity. You're making new neural connections, different neural connections, because you're starting to think in a different way, you know?
Yeah.
And that ultimately, I think, is what leads to this kind of spiritual awakening experience. It's kind of like tuning a radio to the right frequency. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Because Henrietta, something like that sort of happened to you too, right? About kind of that erotic interplay, would you say?
Yeah, it did. But I mean, yours with the actual figure there that you felt was real. I didn't experience that, but mine was, I was, you know, awake, and it felt like it was a sort of something I couldn't see, like an energetic force that was, you know, with me. And then there was this sort of, I mean, it sounds really weird, but sort of golden liquid all over me, you know. But it felt like, honestly, it felt sort of like just masses of electricity or energy running through me. And I've not had an experience like that specific one. I haven't actually seen any of these figures that you're describing and many people describe, but just these little glimpses of things, like a sort of a golden light in the corner of my room. I've definitely had different experiences with light being shot down at me in sort of rays from strange looking creatures, but that, you know, not anything like the people that you're, or not the people, but the figures. They were more sort of insectoid type beings. Yeah.
But what happened to get through? You went in this depression because I get the sense the world was not what anyone has told us it is.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and that I think kind of, because so I had read the Kabbalion, but then I started reading these other books by William Walker Atkinson, which are based very much on Eastern philosophy, you know, meditation, what happens to you after you die, that kind of thing. And I couldn't dismiss any of that anymore because of the experience I just had and the way in which these books had come into my world. You know, it was very, it was supposed to happen, you know, and I
you felt like you were guided in a sense, like there was guy.
Definitely. You know, and then, you know, eventually after, you know, many months of this, come springtime, that was when I began to, the only way I can describe it is that I started to experience the world as though it were a part of me. You know, I could sense the bugs in the grass. I could sense other people's emotions.
What led to that kind of shift from depression to this kind of opening? Was there something?
Yes, I think there was. So, I mean, within the experience, I became so terrified, because after this, I started sleeping with the lights on in my room. I would wake up to the sounds of someone screaming in the house, banging on the walls, footsteps. And so I wasn't sleeping well, obviously,
Right.
and, it was really taking a toll on me, a heavy,
Yeah.
heavy toll. And so one day I was sitting around and I had read William Walker Atkinson's book called The Life Beyond Death. So I knew that, I couldn't escape this even in death. I mean, there was a point where I was sitting on the edge of my bathtub and I was like, what would be the quickest way to die and end this,
Right.
And I think that was my kind of breaking point. That was when I let go of fear. I let go of that fear because I decided that, I can either be afraid of this or I cannot. I don't have any control over it necessarily. So once you rid yourself of that fear and those lower emotions and you decide to get rid of it, then the experience changes and it becomes something else entirely.
So that's a huge breaking point when you're in fear, you're creating a certain reality, and then you just shifted, and suddenly the experience was different. Is that what you're saying? Oh.
Yes. Yeah. So after that, I was still kind of a little bit depressed, but that began to ease, and it took some time for that to ease and go away, and then all of a sudden, as I was experiencing the world as though it were a part of me, I was in like the best mood I've ever been in my entire life. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And it was kind of this unwavering joy and happiness. And I was just content with everything. There was nothing anybody could do to change my mood. Somebody could have smacked me in the face and I would have been like, whatever.
So did you have any more ET contact though, besides?
Oh yeah. So like in the middle of this experience, I was getting really tired of it, and I decided that I was going to give up on all of this because I didn't know where all this was leading to. I had no idea what was happening to me. So I said, I'm giving up on this. I'm going to throw these books away. I'm tired of being emotional and terrified all the time. And so that night I got awoken by this little guy that looked like a yard gnome. And yeah, he had like this locked white beard and locked white hair. And he's standing there looking at me across my nightstand. And I could see he was wearing these goggles that were like some kind of technology. There was like a red glow inside them. But he said, don't give up, keep going. And then put me back to sleep. And I thought, the next morning when I woke up, I thought, well, obviously maybe he knows something I don't know. So maybe I should keep going, and I did. And I think that this is what he knew, that this whole experience would lead to this kind of conditioning of the mind that would allow me to experience this nirvana and know the true nature of the universe for myself.
And that's where you sort of are now, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. And when I wrote the book, I used kind of consciousness to guide me in writing this book. I had to do very little searching for sources and things like that. I would wake up with the name of an author in my head. In terms of Jungian psychology, I had a dream one night.
I'm just going to show the book if I can bring it up here.
Yeah.
Do you see that on the screen there?
Yes.
Okay, it's okay. You in terms of Jungian but initiated UAP, dreams, depression, delusion, shadow people, psychosis, sleep paralysis, pandemics. That's a lot of stuff. So these mythic figures like gnomes and this golden light, in a sense, you're saying they're not fairy tales. They're not myths they're actually realities. Is that?
Yes. Well, I mean, yeah, I think that a lot of people see these things.
Mhm.
And, there's this whole idea of like a succubus
Yeah.
um, that will come around and all of a sudden it sucks the life out of you. And that's the depression that you're feeling after that.
Mm.
But, they're just defining it incorrectly because that's not what's happening, And so
Mm.
if they take that viewpoint, they might get stuck there and think that, and falsely think that there's something feeding on their bad energy or something like that.
But there are things out there. You did see a gnome. You did meet that
Yeah.
blue skinned woman, and
Mhm.
maybe they could suck energies, or I mean,
Yeah,
isn't
and
that?
well,
Yeah.
one of the things that I started looking at was ancient folklore to try and figure this out. And I think that there are a lot of people who are going through this initiatory experience that may think that these things are evil because they start to feel this depression when this is happening.
Right.
But of course, I think physiologically what's happening is that your brain is creating new neural connections, and that's what the depression is all about. I
Yeah.
don't think that that's necessarily something feeding off of your bad energy. I think that these beings ultimately all have the goal of bringing us into this realization of what the universe is so that we can
Mm.
be a part of it rather than be separate from it,
And that's the initiation, but
Yeah.
it's such. I mean, we've been so deprogrammed to look at reality that way. In that sense, we've been. David, go ahead.
Oh yeah,
Well,
I think you're right. I mean, so we have religion, and the way religion describes this initiation is in terms of a death and resurrection, because you start to disassociate yourself with the physical body. So
mhm.
there's that kind of death of the old self and a rebirth into knowing that you are more than just this physical body.
But the connection that I think you make that I've never been able to make is the ETs, whatever, you got initiated looking at that ship and they were there to the spiritual realm. I mean, I've never been able to bridge those two because those ETs are real. There were ships that those Navy, pictures were showing. So, what is that? I mean, are they here to wake us up? Are they on their own trajectory of awakening? I mean, what do you think about?
I think that they're probably on their own trajectory because
Mm.
they've been where we are now. Um, and I think that they have their own levels that they have to overcome, which we will eventually get to. But I think that a lot of it has to do with the fact that this is the point of the universe, right? Helping those in need.
Mm.
And I think that that's kind of what they're doing for us, and that's what we will do for someone else later down the road. And I think that this is just the natural evolution of the universe, and that's how
Mm.
it goes.
And David, you have anything to say about initiation and the whole mythic approach to reality? Like,
Sure. Yeah. Well, I just want to say I'm glad to see William Walker Atkinson brought up. He's a huge fan, I guess, of William Walker Atkinson's work. So that was cool to have him be
and
part
it
of your
helped him. It
journey.
helped Matthew a lot.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Well, yeah. Atkinson's work is fantastic. It presents like a really streamlined kind of access to a bunch of different schools. So that's that was cool to say. I would just say that I think like one of the things that's interesting to me, especially with what you're talking about here, is it's that reframing of the way we think about ourselves, and it's almost like we talked about this in one of the previous ones where Ingo Swann had said that once you start to think about this once you start to think out into the extraterrestrial or the ultra-terrestrial and to think of these others and to realize that this other reality exists, it expands your awareness, and I think that plays into this kind of evolution of consciousness, where we're starting to kind of to move out of ourselves. And once you start to think that way, you start to realize the difference, in how you think and how you access things. So I think it's really interesting with your experience, Matthew, because you have you know, obviously the experience on the ship, right, where this reality is open to you in a very, you know, physical way, in the sense of, you know, you're in the military, you have a what is ostensibly an enemy, you know, or at least an unknown, right, that's kind of encountered, and then now you're going on this other aspect to it, which with Atkinson is interesting too, because, you know, a lot of the early prior to the Kenneth Arnold sighting was Mark Probert's sighting
What
of
was that? What was the Mark Probert sighting?
that was in 1946, the corrida over Los Angeles.
Oh,
So
I
that was
didn't.
actually the first, you know, flying saucer sighting was a year before Arnold, and it was Mark Probert who considered himself a telenognostic, and who was within the circles that were working with William Walker Atkinson stuff. So it's really interesting to see now that we have, you know, this focus on the you know, the Pentagon and that kind of stuff, that you're having gone through that experience, bringing it back to, you know, the mind and to consciousness and to, you know, that kind of field. So
Well, yeah, no, that's good. And the other thing, though, Matthew, is that you're telling it on the other side of it, but when you were going through it, it was excruciating. I mean, from what I've heard you say.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, there were days that, you know, I didn't really understand what was happening, so I kind of made a deal with it. I said, you know, I have to be able to work. So when I'm at work, this has to shut off, you know. But you know, there were days I would come home from work and, you know, I'd lay on the floor of my bedroom, curled up in a ball, crying like a baby, shivering, my teeth were chattering. Uh and then there was like the terror on top of it of the constant nightmares. Um,
That was happening because the world suddenly, I guess, was pulled out from under you, the reality.
yeah, I think I was starting, you know, I was reading these books by Atkinson, so I knew that there must be some truth to them. And so I was starting to formulate new opinions about things, you know, and one of the things that happened, and something that I thought was very interesting, was that William Walker Atkinson says that nightmares are the killing out of false ideas in your psyche. And one of the dreams that I had was like my parents being chopped to death with an axe, right? But I think the point of that experience is that, you know, since we're all just these um you know, infinite beings with no death, no birth, and ultimately that's what we really are, that was the killing out of the idea that these are my parents, you know. They're not my parents, that we're all just in this same boat together, you know. and we're all these immortal souls, you know, and that's ultimately what we are.
Right. But where do the ETs, I'm curious because there's been so much ET activity, not that many people get to the place you got to. Maybe because it was so extreme for you. I'm trying to just, where is that bridge in the ET realities to the spiritual link that you've come to? That's what I'm trying to
Yeah,
understand.
I think that the link with them is that, so they put you through this ringer, right? And it's up to you as to whether or not you want to allow fear to interfere with this process, or you want to allow hate or anger or any of the other lower emotions to interfere with this. And what they're trying to get you to do is to let go of those things, right? So the best way to have you let go of fear is to just scare the bejesus out of you, you know, until until you just can't take it anymore. And then you let go of that. And ultimately, I think that's a part of tuning the brain to the right frequency to be able to experience the universe as a part of you. Because you can't have fear that would be clouding that kind of thing. And that's why most people don't experience it, because they allow this fear to creep in and they keep it there, because they just don't understand that they don't have to feel fear if they don't want to.
Yeah. I mean, that happened to you too, Henrietta, right? You had those nightmares for years, and then somehow you turned it around, right? I mean, can you talk about that?
Well, actually, I like what David was saying, and on the back of what you were saying, Matthew, about this kind of reframing of ourselves, looking at ourselves differently. I mean, that's my personal journey at the moment, is that everything you've been saying, I relate to, not so much to your specific experience, but this sort of passage through, you know, being so terrified or feeling like something is so strange and anomalous to what you have understood to be your reality so far, that you just kind of push through. And when you said it right in the beginning, that you felt that the world was a part of you, I know that's something I've always felt quite strongly, but these days it's sort of everything blurs. I mean, I'm the insects, I'm the, you know, your whole physical orientation in the world changes, as well as your whole your mindset. I like what you're saying too about this sort of your what you just said, tuning the brain. I mean, it does seem to be, I'm interested in that, sort of what's happening in the brain, which, you know, is the receptor or the receiver of consciousness. Because you know, if we are evolving or intensifying as beings, or our consciousness is intensifying. I was reading that somewhere recently about Gabser. Do you know him?
Oh, Gene Gipser? Yeah,
Yeah,
brilliant. Yeah.
yeah, and it really kind of changed my thought about sort of, people talk a lot about this expansion of consciousness, but he was talking about this intensification of it, which I felt to be much more what seems to be happening for a lot of people. And certainly for me, it's like this intensification, which is fantastic and phenomenal. But you're right, you know, sort of losing the fear of accepting these new and anomalous experiences is the kind of liberation to go forward, you know.
Right.
Well,
Yeah, and you know, in doing my research for all of this, I also found that, you know, in ancient cultures, they realized that these types of emotions would keep you from going through this process or stunt it.
Absolutely. I mean,
Right.
there's a whole history of literature and anthropology that sort of talks of these mystical experiences that we can't frame in, you know, scientifically speaking.
right. So then what happens, Matthew? And it stops us and stunts us, but then how do we get through that?
You get through that by simply deciding that your emotions are your own. And it is up to you as to what you want to feel. Because that was like the biggest eye-opening experience when I decided that, you know, I decided I'm just not going to be afraid anymore. I'm going to shut it off because I can't do that anymore. That was when I had like this moment of realization that, you know, my whole life had been just a manifestation of my emotions that I was just manifesting outwardly in the world, you know, and that all of that was me, and it was no one else. You can't say you made me angry, right? Because you obviously can't make me feel anything if I don't want to feel it. The only person who is in control of your emotions is yourself. And that is the big realization. And once that starts to happen and you start to just control your emotions to the nth degree, like I decided I was going to, in this realization, that was when, you know, I began to experience the world differently. You know, someone, like, for instance, someone would cut me off in traffic, and I wouldn't, my first emotion wouldn't be anger. I would feel sorry for them, that they were so out of control with themselves that their demons were manifest for everyone to see here in the world.
Right.
you know? And so that's where I really started to change my mental outlook on everything. And that's ultimately what did it for me. And I think this has a lot to do with, you know, the middle road in Buddhism, right? You take the middle road where you're neither the sadist or the masochist, you know, you take that middle road, and that middle road and that kind of flat affect that you can have is the right way. If
Right.
that makes sense.
No, it makes sense, of course, but I still want to bring the ET idea into this, because maybe, I mean, what you're saying is the classic awakening, but is this just the next manifestation of how we are supposed to wake up, the ET stuff? Or is there another level to the collective awakening? Or, I mean, I'm trying to understand, because I know it's real what happened to you, because I had similar things, and maybe it did expand my mind too. I think it probably did, but why do we need that? Why do, you know, people go to war and all that, and they have these like breakthroughs? I mean, what aspect of this ET thing makes it maybe the same or different? I don't know.
So I think what the ET thing does, and in terms of like the mythologic hero's journey, so the ET thing is like the call, right? This is a call to something greater. And so this is kind of what starts you to wake up. It's like a smack in the face.
It's the hero's journey, the classic hero's journey. Yes.
Yeah. And that's what will start the whole thing off. The problem is that so many people, we have these hard walls up, right? This is reality and that is not. And I think that when you have an experience like this and you see a craft or you see a being in your room, it starts to soften those walls. And I think that some people naturally have softer walls and they don't necessarily need that kind of a slap in the face to go through this. Others, like myself, I needed that. So a lot of people think that, you know, oh, well, he thinks he's so special because these beings guided him through this. But I think it was just that, you know, I was so hard-headed that unless they were there smacking me in the face, it never would have happened, you know.
Were you hard-headed? I mean, you joined the military. I mean, were you kind of pretty stuck on your reality?
I was very stuck on my reality, but I will say that I practiced stoicism without realizing that I was doing it. I viewed it as like a kind of a way to simplify my life and to not be jerked around by my every emotion. And so I was practicing this, not really knowing that it was an ancient philosophy. And I think that is what kind of led to the path of being able to get through this, and also led to the experience. And I think that I had taken that as far as I could with what my idea of reality was. So I needed this extra smack in the face.
What were you saying, Henrietta? You were going to say something, Henrietta? Did we lose her?
Oh. I think she might be frozen.
Oh,
it looks frozen
in time. But the mythic approach that somehow you've tapped into, this initiation.
Yeah.
We have to get over the fact that that myths are not real, but myths are something substantial.
Yeah. So the way myth works is that myth is what we are, right? So
explain that though, what that means.
So you know, so let's talk about the myth of you know, the injured king,
the Fisher King, yeah.
The Fisher King, yeah. So in this way, myth is what we live, right? So there's this king, right? In order to prove himself, he decides he's going to go out into the forest alone as a boy and kind of prove his might, you know? So he goes out into the forest and he comes across this fire, and within the fire he sees the Holy Grail, you know? And so he reaches his hand in there to grab the grail, and he's burned. He's badly burned. He never grabs the cup. So he comes back. He's crowned king. And then he sends his armies out far and wide looking for this grail. You know, he's searching for it everywhere, right? And then he's laying there dying in his bed. A fool wanders into the castle, and the fool asks him, you know, what's wrong with you? And he says, well, I'm thirsty. I need some water. And so the fool grabs a cup by his bedside, fills it with water, and hands it to him. And he starts drinking it, and he realizes, oh my gosh, this is the Holy Grail. How did you find this? You know? And the fool says, I just knew you needed a drink of water, you know? And that's the point of this, right? We're all born well. We are all born not hating one another. These emotions that we have are learned traits, right? And so we go out in the world and we have our innocence, and then we get burned, right? We get burned by all of these emotions. We become jaded. And so we spend the rest of our lives trying to get back to that innocence, right? And you see this in people all over the world, people who want to go back to the good old days when things were simpler, right? And what they're describing there is the fact that things weren't simpler, but you just thought about them much more simply, right? You lost your innocence. So that's what you're trying to regain. And so that's what that story is about. And so in this way, we're all of us living myth, you know? We're all living the life of the Fisher King, because we're all looking for that cup. But ultimately that we'll find that inside ourselves if we just turn our gaze inward instead of looking for it in the world out there, because it doesn't exist out there. It exists right here, you know?
Right. Yeah, Henrietta. Yeah, please jump in.
I just have a question for you, Matthew, but I obviously I've missed part of it, so forgive me.
No, just the story. It was just the story of the Fisher King. I'm sure you've heard it, but that was just what you missed. Yeah.
Well, no, but before I got knocked off as well. But I'm just curious as to, you know, do you keep having these strange, inexplicable experiences? Have they continued on with, you know, figures in your room or physical experiences or craft? You know, how's it?
So it's progressed into something much more subtle, and I would call it, I mean, I guess people today might call it mysticism, where it's started to become much more intuitive, in which, you know, I could have someone that I don't know maybe in a conversation with some stranger, and they'll mention something to me, some myth or some book, and I'll know that that's for me, and I'll go read up on it, and sure enough, you know, it fits exactly with what I've been looking for. Or, you know, I'll wake up with the name of an author in my head to read, you know, so it's become much more like mysticism and much more intuitive in that way.
So no more bizarre experiences with ET showing up so much?
No more ETs. Although, you know, the other night I I would swear that maybe something happened, because I was in bed and I have like a sheet and then a comforter.
Right.
And then when I woke up in the morning, they were flipped. So it was the comforter and then the sheet. And I was like, I don't know how that would have happened throughout the night, you know?
Yeah, that's interesting.
So maybe
that's what I was wondering. Like those things that you really go like, well, how did I do that? Yeah.
So the question comes down to, everyone, of course, is on the hero's journey. Like you say, everyone's the Fisher King. And for you, it was with ETs, but that was your initiation. But is the world, you get the sense, coming to a place where it's going to be, with the UAP stuff, with the government, a worldwide initiate? Is this part of what happened to you and what you see?
Well, yeah, I think that there will be more people going through it, but I think that really this can only be affected on an individual basis. And I think that the ancients kind of knew that, which is why, we have all these structures around the world that are for this purpose,
Like talk about that structures, you mean?
So like Göbekli Tepe, it has alignments to like the autumnal equinox and the winter solstice. So my whole thing is that this starts and ends at the same time, because all cultures around the world have the same types of holidays throughout the year. Right in the beginning, in October sometime, there's usually some kind of death festival, right? We have
Right.
Halloween, and there's the Day of the Dead down
Mhm.
south in South America and Mexico. And then, around Christmas time, we have some kind of resurrection type
Right.
holiday. And so we have Christmas, obviously.
Yeah.
And then, in the spring, there's some kind of rebirth holiday. And a lot of people think that, well, that's just because of the natural cycles of the earth, but we're inseparable from our environment, right? We're a part of it. Everything is one. So we also have these cycles within ourselves. And this is the time of year when this would happen. And the ancients recognized that. And so they set these temples up with alignments to the autumnal equinox when this starts through the winter solstice and into the spring.
So we're here to follow that. Go ahead, David. Go ahead.
I was going to say that's really interesting. That's an interesting point, because when you're doing alchemical work, the alchemical work actually follows that pattern. And to do proper like material alchemy or spiritual alchemy follows that exactly what you're talking about, kind of a cyclical in forming the philosopher's stone and experiencing the philosopher's stone has those kind of seasonal transitions to it. So that's
right.
That's a really interesting point.
Yeah, and if you look at alchemy, what you're doing is you're taking like an amalgam, right, and you're mixing it with mercury and putting it in and applying heat and pressure, and then you end up with gold, which is obviously a symbol of immortality. So that's
Right.
this whole awakening experience where you realize who and what you are. You're this immortal being, and so that's what gold ultimately symbolizes. And you can see that at places around the world where they were practicing these types of things in initiatory experiences.
Right. You talk about it's an initiation. I just want to welcome Roderick Martin. Thank you, Roderick, for joining us. And
all good.
but-
Hey, what you say there, Matthew?
Hi, how's it going?
Look, I got my book.
Oh, you got a book. Oh yeah, hold that book. This is Matthew's book again, Initiation. What's the subtitle there? UAPs. So I still want to. Oh yeah, thanks. I still want to go back a little bit. I hate to like keep dwelling on this point, but there seems to be something different happening, and maybe it's just because here we are now, but. That's the old story, the initiation, the culture. I'm hoping there might be a new story, and maybe there is no new story. Maybe I'm just hoping for something that's, I just feel like maybe this bigger picture of joining the cosmos which is what the ancient temples were really about. Temple means reflection of the star. Something might be different this time, but maybe that's my own delusion. What do you feel about
it? So I think that definitely there's a push to try and bring this out into the public sphere. I mean, I think
by who? Who's pushing that?
Well, I think that I don't know who it is behind the scenes, but there are apparently probably people at the Pentagon that want this to come out, because I think that they realize that ultimately it has to do with this realization of who and what we are. And they kind of want to cause that kind of awakening to happen,
Really? At the Pentagon, you think they really care about? I mean, maybe they do, but it seems strange that they would really care about a global spiritual awakening,
It would seem that way, but I I kind of think that maybe that's probably the point. I think that they really want to usher in this new age of humanity, you know,
At the
and
Pentagon, really? Well,
yeah.
maybe. I mean,
Because I think that my whole take on this is that, you know, with people like me, and I think these beings maybe do this a little bit, because there's this interest in nuclear material, right?
right.
And I think that with them, the way they look at that is it's more like a triage type situation to them, right? So
What is that?
they
What is?
see,
Yeah.
well, they see someone who's there with nuclear weapons, and has their finger on that button. So obviously you're going to want that person to know who and what they are so that they're not using that irresponsibly, right? And so those are the people they're going to run to first and say, "Oh my gosh, we got to initiate you and make you understand who and what you are so that you're not doing this," you know?
Right.
And I think that that's ultimately their interest in the military, and also following that with nuclear material ultimately.
Wow. That's a very optimistic approach. I never considered that, but why not? Let me see if other people want to join us. Any other comments here? David, Carol, and Mary Edwards. Are you, John? You could turn your cameras on, and because I think you're saying that we are heading towards a worldwide planetary awakening, is sort of what the big picture looks like, right, David? I mean, Matthew.
Yeah, I would like to think so. I really would. I think that there is a lot of work to do. In reading like the works of Plato, who is someone that I recognize as having gone through this same thing. And it's kind of why he wrote Allegory of the Cave, because you can't possibly explain this to people, you know.
Right.
And I think that I would like to think that there's going to be this global awakening, but I think that we also need a lot of education at the same time. We need people to start practicing Stoicism and to understand what that means. You know, a lot of people think that that means just, you know, bottling up emotion, and that obviously doesn't work. Stoicism is all about, you know, not feeling that emotion to begin with.
But not the drama, not the like the human drama, the extremes, the hysteria, that
Right,
kind
yeah.
of thing. Yeah.
Right, yeah. Just get away from those extremes, right?
Right.
And that's the whole idea of, you know, the symbolic crucifixion of Christ, right? You've got someone who's crucified by these extremes, you know, and they're unable to come to center and take that middle road. And that's kind of ultimately the symbolism of the crucifixion of Christ.
Right. Mary, were you Henrietta, do you want to say something? Were you going to say something?
I just wanted to go back to, do you think that, you know, all these topics that you're now exploring in depth and that have become a part of you, do you think that the original, you know, this gimbal footage you described, sort of that activated something in you that you didn't really understand, and then you had these strange experiences with, you know, the blue woman? I mean, do you, because I've read a lot of people who get specific messages from these beings about the environment and, you know, anti-war. I mean, do you feel that your current sort of path has definitely been informed by these experiences? I mean, you were saying that, but like if you were to examine it, do you see that experience with the blue woman as sort of, you know, you really reoriented yourself completely?
Yeah, I do. You know, but it took me a while to get there, because I had to kind of unpack, because everything within that experience is something that I realized was symbolic, you know, and meant to be interpreted as well at the same time. Because, you know, so I had been, it's kind of an offshoot here, but one day when I was listening to an audio recording of the Kabbalion, I was staring at this window in my room as I was laying in bed, and I was thinking about creation and the mental aspects of that, and the reality of that. And I thought about how, someone came by and they had this idea to create this trim around this window,
Mhm.
and then they followed through with action, and it was creation through and through, right?
Mhm.
And it was then that I realized during this experience with the blue woman that when I woke up at first, I was looking at that window, which is
Mm.
creation and
Right.
and mental creation. And
Mm.
then to have this experience happen, and then also to see the rays of light coming out of her head, obviously suggests something mental, right?
Yeah.
Some kind of mental reality.
Mm.
Do you find that she stays with you? I mean, do you feel like, do you understand what I'm saying? Do you feel like she's gone away, it was one experience, or do you feel that she's sort of part of your world, if you like? Like, do you know what I'm saying? Do you still feel a
I do
relationship?
So I not necessarily that I feel a relationship, but so later on, when I was in this state of nirvana where I could experience the world as though it were a part of me, I had an experience where I was laying in bed, and I was introduced to a child that had resulted from this experience, and I was told to open my hand, and so I opened my hand. I couldn't open my eyes, and I was laying with my arms crossed in front of me on my arms. So I was very much kind of disabled, and so I felt this arm placed in my hand, which was, the same skin as the female had. And I felt, the fingers that were much longer than normal human fingers. And as the arm was pulled out of my arm, I felt kind of this static around my hand. And I got this impression of like particle entanglement and also reincarnation. And this voice said, "So you can come back to us." And
Mm.
I thought to myself, wow, this is like kind of like the idea of heaven, going to heaven, being saved and going to heaven is kind of the whole idea there.
But that's a big piece, I think. That's a really big piece of the story. Well, I'll come back to that. Mary, were you gonna say something, Mary? Unmute, Mary. Unmute. Right. Yes. Mary. Yes. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll just talk for a couple of minutes, but I
Sure.
can really relate, and I think we all can in a lot of ways, to what you're talking about, this sort of terror that we go through in this waking up consciousness that we're all pretty much involved in, that I saw at 5 and 6 when I was abducted and I've gone to space many times, and I haven't been able to remember a lot of it, but I know I'm protected. I know I had to completely surrender to my fears. I signed up for this, and I am here to help humanity, as we all are. And as the veil thins now in this big, huge shift of consciousness right now, where we are letting go, we are weighing the scales of good and evil. There's either fear or there's love. When I finally gave up fear, well, not totally, but over the last 3 years since both my parents passed, and I was able, because they were part of Secret Space, as I've mentioned a couple of times to you guys before, from the 50s, the blinking the lights in the craft when I was young, how could I have these hybrid kids, all these flashes I've had and this time traveling I've had for 70 years now, I finally had to let go of the fear and just say, Mary, you are really creative. You've done design all over the planet. You've worked at NASA. All these people have helped you open up. Just let go of the controls. And we are in the biggest shift right now. The new age is shifting. The ETs are here. I saw some at dinner, sitting 2 tables away from me. The veil is thinning now. They don't want to freak us out and just plop down in our backyard. I've been invited up to the Pleiades and by the Federation for the last few years, and now I feel like I will go sometime. They've said for in August or September, because what I've been doing up until last week is working on interiors on other planets. That because I'm part of my lab, which I learned a few weeks ago, and my memory has been blocked for my whole life because of my particular kind of space DNA that I've mentioned. I have no memory almost of my whole life. And now I'm doing lots. I've done, Russian with Barbara. I've been hypnotized the last few years. I've become friends with Emery Smith, and I go to a lot of different conferences. And I'm finally just surrendering to the crazy part. And I have 8 hybrid kids in China to 2 in the Pleiades that are 6 or 7 years old. So what I signed up for with the contracts that we all sign at birth, I chose that. I wanted to help humanity. My father did that. My grandfather did that. And finally, now that I've focused on learning about it, and it is a mythical, religion, it's all those things all in one. Our globe, our planet is one huge grid. If you've ever been to Peru or seen anything on any of the shows on ancient healing or Gaia that we all, I think probably a lot of us watch all the time, it's one big energy field. That's what we are. The rocks, the trees, the people, we are all one. And all the gods and goddesses and all the religious from situations and beliefs is all happening right now. And the new world is happening right now, and it's going to go on for the next 20 or 30 years. But as the veil thins, we do have to try to not let command and control of our government and other negativity of people bring us down. So if we can be positive and accept this, like what everybody's been talking about a little bit today, we can find peace. And I finally now have peace because I know pretty much a lot of things that I have gone through in my life that was pretty terrifying.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Mary. I think she's right. The veil, that's what I was trying to get with the ET. Something is thinning between this density and another density that may include ETs or even gnomes or, the ghosts or astro. Something is shifting. Something's definitely shifting.
Just one last thing. We know in America, my dad was part of, out as a rocket, had a big aeronautical aerospace company. And then he worked, Werner von Braun worked for him, and he was part of Project Blue Book and Secret Space and all that stuff for his whole life. And now I talked to him again yesterday up there, and I said, Dad, here you are up there now, and you won't even tell me what's going on. He said, I have a gun through my Dave the Mystic in Colorado said, he's showing the gun going to his head that he cannot reveal this. Our government is one of the only ones in the world that doesn't share UFO information.
No, I don't think it's the only one. I think it's a worldwide thing. And
I've researched it for a long time.
But according to Matthew here, Matthew's idea was that you're saying that eventually that the government actually wants us to wake up.
It's a lot of dark money. I know 2 people in the Pentagon that are into it, 10 people that I know in the Pentagon and NASA said, oh no, we're not going to let this go. But anyway, the shift is happening. And if we let go and surrender as much as we can and learn, we're all here to help each other. The ETs were here. We are ETs. I'm 18% human right now with people that have read me. We're all in this great shift together. And if we can help each other, figure out what we all play our part in this humanity, all of us sitting here are here to help. And if we can let go and love and get unified and plug into this electric current of frequency that is elevating us every day, we have a lot of hope ahead of us and a lot of joy.
I think there is a lot of hope ahead. Let me just ask Roderick, you're thinking over there. You want to jump in and join us about what you're hearing here?
Well, if I jump in, I am thinking and I am learning. So let me look up here at the camera. But I think that for the most part, it's, and I think I repeated this, it's a new phenomenon for me as I'm hearing all of the connected stories and the different things. And then as I was listening to Matthew previously, of course, we talked to him in the past. And then again, when I hopped in, as far as, our nuclear weapons, and I've been doing some research lately myself and starting to realize, we are going to get this conscious connection, and due to our technology advancement in thermonuclear and all these things. And because we're not doing these things to make mankind better, we're doing it for destruction. And that's something that they're not wanting to happen. So when it comes down to whether, we're being prepared, or the unveiling, or, I still think, we're going to be a little disappointed when it comes down to this disclosure of what we think we're going to hear, as opposed to the reasoning. But in the most part, when it comes down to what Mary was just saying, her past and her experiences and her messages, and like I said, when I talk to Anjali, then I'm listening to Matthew, then I read some things in your book.
Right.
I think all of y'all need to just go to lunch and have a pizza, because y'all connected. It's just,
we're all connected.
Y'all connected. Yeah.
Wait, thanks. Carol, did you want to say something here? Carol's very connected.
And I would be there too. I mean, all y'all go eat it out.
No, you're always good for a pizza. I know that, Roger. Okay. Yes, Carol. I think she's froze. But the question
Internet is a little unstable. So
okay,
hopefully
go ahead.
you can hear me.
We hear you. Yes.
Can you hear me at all?
Yes, we can hear you. If you shut off your
No.
camera, we might be able to hear you better. Let me
Internet
just.
problems.
Okay, because Carol's had a lot of spiritual experiences, seen a lot of things.
Okay, I'll stop the video.
That's better, I think. Okay, go ahead.
Well, I was going to mention to Matthew, because when he started talking about this blue woman, and then the spiritual experiences that came to him afterwards, I was relating that to what I was just hearing. I mentioned to you, and this of Arcturians, and one of the three blue, and they have golden eyes and sort of reptilian skin.
Arcturians, okay.
But she was going on again about how spiritually
Arcturian.
advanced brilliant people.
That's
Right.
Is that what you
Okay.
saw?
No, I would.
These are Arcturians, yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
what did you
So it may be that.
They're different colors. They're
Okay,
different.
wait,
shades.
Mary, let Carol finish. Yeah. Okay. Wait, Matthew, you were going to say something? No.
Oh, I was just going to say that I don't think I've ever seen anything that I would classify as that. I saw, a lot of these beings I noticed wear these thick, dark, big glasses.
They're not eyes, they're glasses.
No,
or something?
yeah, that's what I saw was glasses. Because I could see behind them, they were dark, but I could see like the glow inside of them. And see that like the ridge of their nose coming down on the other side of the glass. So I know that maybe that was some kind of technology, and maybe that's why a lot of people think they have big eyes. I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure.
Wait, Carol, I think you lost you. Carol, you still there? Did we lose Carol?
Yes.
Oh, you didn't.
They
You're breaking. You're
covering up. That there could have been some spiritual awakening.
You're breaking up. I'm only hearing a few different. You want to put that in the chat, and I'll just read it. Carol, yeah, you're really lagging there. But let me put that in the chat, and I'll repeat the question. But the question I also have from Matthew is that last comment you made, that this is how you'll return home. What was that comment when they said to you?
Yeah, so I got this impression of particle entanglement and reincarnation, and the voice said, "So you can come back to us."
So does that imply that that's where you originally came, that you actually are that?
I don't know. I think that it definitely, in my mind, speaks to. So in Atkinson's books, I'd been reading that reincarnation, you will always reincarnate to your highest potential. And so my idea with that and my thought on that was that, my DNA with them is now evidence of my next highest potential, if that makes any sense.
No, that makes sense. The other question I had for you is that maybe, I mean, you're saying this woman demonstrated sort of a symbolic triggering to you, but maybe all of reality is in a sense mythic and symbolic, and it doesn't really exist in the way like here we are on Zoom or people watching on YouTube, but this is also a kind of mythic display of a false reality as well. This is a symbol of something else. I mean,
right. Yeah, and I would agree with that to the extent that, we are all of the one consciousness. And so everything is a part of that consciousness by extension.
Right.
And so, all of this is just kind of imagined. And that's why, the Hindus have this idea that the universe is just a dream, of the one God as he's napping.
So, right, this is Vishnu's dream. And when he opens his eyes, the world disappears. but for you, is there a part of you that you sense arranged all this to happen to this lower part? I hear a high pitch as I'm saying that. There's like a high pitch coming through my left ear here. And then it's disappeared. But was a part of you, I mean, I guess a part of all of us, like even Roderick, he's created this scenario on a higher level to learn. And do you feel that immediate connection to whatever higher part of yourself put you through this trauma because it wants this lower part to wake up? Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I do. And I think in the end you do feel that because in this nirvana or whatever, you feel this sense of just like love, I guess, like unconditional love. And it's almost like being wrapped in a blanket of unconditional love, if you could imagine how that would physically feel. And I think that is more like, congratulations, you figured it out, and you've arrived, and this is your reward for that. You've learned and you've arrived.
And you feel that now, right? That nirvana?
Yes. Well, no. So that's the thing, is that it only lasts a short time. It does. And that's why I opened my book with the Homeric hymn to the goddess Demeter.
Yeah, talk about that. Yeah.
So this god, it's the central myth to the Greek mysteries. There's this goddess who decides that she's going to repay this family for their kindness towards her. So she decides she's going to turn their youngest son into an immortal god. And so she does this by placing him into a fire to burn like a log every night. And as she's doing this, the boy's mother screams, and as the boy's mother just discovers Demeter doing this. And so Demeter, she becomes enraged at this. And she chides the boy's mother and says, I would have turned this boy into an immortal god, but you interrupted the process. Now he'll only be immortal for a short time. And I had read the books in William Walker Atkinson's series. He also has books by a woman named Mabel Collins, who talks about how this period of the calm that follows the storm can only be experienced for a short time. So all of these myths and everything, they're all talking about the same thing, and that you'll feel this nirvana, but then it will go away. And I remember where I was and what I was doing when it went away, because I knew it immediately.
So you were, describe that, because you were feeling what, and then what happened?
Yeah. So I was sitting at my desk working, and I was working in a cubicle at the time. So it was a cubicle farm. You know, we were all sitting in our cubicles. It was dead quiet. Everybody was just sitting working. And then there was someone in a cubicle behind me that for no reason just started yelling and threw something across the room in a fit of anger. And it was so immediately jarring that I became upset and angry at her for just a moment. And as soon as I felt that, it was like it shut off like a light switch. I felt it immediately in my shoulders. Suddenly my shoulders were slumped in a way that they hadn't been in a long time. I could no longer sense everyone around me like I could before. So it left immediately. It was just very obvious when it stopped, you know.
And how long ago was that?
So I actually was only in this state for about 4 months, I would say, before it shut off completely.
But now you're sort of coming back there on your own, right? As it seems like you're sort of.
Yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily that you come back to it, but just that you, like, I've realized that there are certain things that I can do. And William Walker Atkinson talks about this as well, about how, you know, you can just wonder about something in your mind for a few days and kind of imagine that being wrapped up in a box and sent down the chute. And in a few days' time, you'll get your answer to that problem. And I've certainly found that to be true. I'll wonder about something and then kind of put it on the back. And then usually within a week, I'll get something that will explain that, you know, either the name of an author or some book will come my way. But it always happens.
You know, one more thing I want to talk to you about is in that Demeter myth, Demeter became the goddess of the Eleusinian mysteries, right?
Yes.
And so talk about the Eleusinian mysteries, but also just to throw in there, I think maybe the ET experience has replaced the Eleusinian mysteries in our modern day. But talk about what the Eleusinian mysteries were.
Yeah, so this was the experience that was central to the Greek religious experience. It was a mystery, and you were initiated into this mystery. They started in the autumn and they ended in the spring. You had to be sponsored by someone who had been through it before, so they would go through it with you, and kind of hold.
But what was it exactly? What happened?
So it was, I think it was the same experience that I had with these ET beings. And I'll tell you why, because so at the end of the myth, when Demeter is chiding the boy's mother, she throws off her disguise, because at this point she's disguised like an old woman. When she throws off her disguise, it said that her divine light illuminated the entire palace like a bolt of lightning. And I thought to myself, that sounds exactly like the same light show that I saw, you know? And so in reading these myths and hearing about Demeter and how she was tall, you know, and her head almost touched the ceiling. And at one point in the myth, she's described as her divine light. Even though she's in this disguise, her divine light illuminates this entryway that she's standing in. And so you can see that this myth is full of the same symbolism that I saw, that I witnessed. And so I think that this ultimately was the same experience. But you know, I think there is something to be said for the fact that they would bring it on usually with the use of maybe psychedelic drugs or something like that. Because there's this whole phenomenon of people who will have drug-induced psychosis, right? And so that's basically what they were doing within the Eleusinian mysteries, was having this drug-induced psychosis that would spur on this awakening, you know. And it was said that initiates of the mysteries would return to their families unafraid of death, and that they were very changed people. And that was exactly what had happened to me. I'm not afraid of death. I'm not afraid of dying because I know that there's no such thing. I know that now. So
yeah. Well, David, were you going to say something there? Because you're a student of the ancient history.
Yeah, I was just going to add, it's interesting talking about the physicality of the experience that you had that kind of mirrored these myths. Bringing, going back to the Jungian archetypes, right, which you kind of talked about earlier, or Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey. Jung experienced poltergeist phenomena. He experienced actual contact with apparitions and that kind of thing, and he very much thought that he was in contact with something else, and so I think it's very resonant what you're saying. You did kind of experience the contemporary version of this thing, because he saw himself at his time experiencing the contemporary version of that, and the things with the terror and that, his family was worried about him because he had these fugue states, and he had the poltergeist phenomenon that was occurring and these apparitions occurring where other people were seeing it too, because he had his kids there and his wife and that. So, I think that's very resonant, talking about this idea of mythology as a lived experience,
Right. And Henrietta, that's sort of a process you went through too with the psychedelics. And as you were kind of processing your experience, you kind of went through a psychedelic mystery school yourself, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, just everything that Matthew and David were saying about their, Matthew's personal experience, and then David talking about Jung, which is really interesting, actually. I didn't know that he'd experienced the poltergeist and apparitions. I mean, I did to a degree, but I want to look at that more. But yeah, for me, just this pandemic here, actually, I've had some very small amounts of psychedelics native to Mexico, where I am. And, but I had extremely profound contact with, I like the word apparitions. Yeah, I mean, a multitude. And it certainly hasn't left me. In fact, what's interesting to me in listening to Matthew talk about his strange experience with these beings is that they stay with me and continue to inform me in some way. And so I feel their sort of presence, or that I have access to some kind of communion with them. Yeah.
Do you feel that too, Matthew, that they're accessible?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, there was one point at which my experiences were kind of slowing down, and I wasn't seeing them in my room anymore, and I wondered one night before I went to bed if they were still around and still watching me. And the next morning when I woke up, I have this thing that Mabel Collins calls waking clairvoyance, where I'll hear this voice that'll give me some guidance or something. And the voice that morning told me they're always watching you. So I knew that they're always here. They're always around. I may not see them. They may not make their presence known, but they're always watching,
So that's interesting. Then you hear and see these, things, or you hear a message that you have no idea where it's coming from, to put it simply. Well, and that's interesting to me.
The way I learned about Jungian archetypes is, and not necessarily Jungian archetypes, because I think this person did a lot more work, but I woke one morning with the name Robert Moore going through my head after I had this experience where this guy was teaching me about human psychology in my dream. And so I looked up, I thought maybe this guy wrote some books or something. And and he nailed down, I think, Jung's theory much more succinctly and much more accurately. It's more of a nail on the head with Dr. Robert Moore. He really knew what he was talking about, and he knew about this initiation experience as well, because he had this book that I was reading called The Archetype of Initiation. And it was in reading that book that I was like, oh, that's what happened to me. This whole thing was an initiation. That's why the Kabbalion's written by the 3 initiates. And that's why I'm reading this book now. And so, I just found that Dr. Robert Moore is right on with the archetypes in the psyche and the archetypal structures that exist in the psyche.
I want to look at that book. Yeah. I'll get to Mary. 1 second. I just want to say to Henrietta, it seems like you were putting yourself through your own initiation with the psychedelics and your father and this thing that you were going through in your process. It seemed like another initiation, right?
Well, yeah, I don't know what it was. But actually, no, just to take it though out of the personal, now I'm remembering the first experience I had, which was exactly a year ago in a field here in Mexico, which was really more about the sort of structure of the whole world and how humans first came to inhabit it. And that the sort of messages I got, or what I felt very strongly, was that we were just out of rhythm. With I had this message was we have to pause and then get back into rhythm. And, it sounds very simplistic, but there were just a sort of an avalanche of messages that were kind of cosmic. They just kept coming. It was but it felt more like I was just able to sort of see clearly about, how you were saying that, that just the interconnectedness of everything. And I will say that none of these experiences personally are of an intellectual nature. At the time when they're happening, I'm not thinking about it, but I made sure that I took my notepad pen so that when I came out of the experience and I was remotely back in my kind of rational mind and I could actually write, that the first thing I wrote was, I'm writing these words so that I can make some sort of sense of what just happened. Because I knew I wouldn't be able to put it into language after a certain passage of time. I'm quite interested in trying to kind of it's very hard to decode those experiences or even to talk about them, I find, really.
Yeah. Wait, okay, Mary, did you have to say something? And then I think we'll wrap up soon, but
just real quick, writing it down really helps me too. And a couple of the conferences I've been to the last couple of years really help getting it out, asking for manifestations, asking for guides. And in the last couple of years, I stopped everything that I was doing, and I've done, 2 books now, and I'm doing art and channeling, doing all these other off-planet stuff. But when I knew that I'd always been protected. I know I've had Pleiadians. I've been told for 50 years that I have 2 Pleiadians watching me. And I know what I've noticed when they come in my room, I hear a little knocking on the door. I felt them here a couple of months ago, checking on me that physically that I was okay. And now I have 3 Arcturians. I've never felt so protected. But again, I think if we really believe and do the hard work, I call it strength through struggle, and see that we are here to help be light bearers of whatever little thing that we're doing. We are here part of the love army, like we're talking about love and peace. And we really are making a difference, and they know it. I've heard from the Pleiadian Federation yesterday saying, you're all doing a great job, and it's really hard on the planet right now. A lot of people die, a lot of people are flipping off. It's really a time to really get our strength and be warriors with a big open heart. So anyway.
Well, that brings up the part of the title of the book about the pandemic. What do you say about this whole period we've been going through now, Matthew?
Well, I think that, the things that have been happening recently certainly have a way of focusing our attention inward.
Mhm.
And I think that that's ultimately what's happening with the pandemic. A lot of people know people that have died. A lot of people have lost parents, brothers, sisters. So whenever you go through a life-changing experience like that, it has a way of just focusing your gaze inward. Because
Right.
you're struck with this, and all of a sudden you start to think, well, what does this mean? What is all this?
Mhm.
And so you do a lot of what they call soul searching. And it's called soul searching because you are, in fact, turning that gaze inward.
So do you think the planet is coming because it was of course, a planetary phenomena? Is the planet awakening to these new realities, as they say?
I think so. And I think that we need to do a lot more to usher that in, I think, in terms of, the science that's being done on this.
Mhm.
Like Mark Gober's work. He has a podcast called Where Is My Mind? That I really enjoy because it's all about the scientific work that's being done on consciousness, and it suggests the evidence from these scientists that are working on it suggests that we are all ultimately all part of a singular consciousness.
Right. So when people, I'm like Carol asked, it could be that the blue lady was Arcturian and imparted some way a higher spiritual opening of your crown chakra since you had an all is one experience afterwards. Were there any messages from her? But before you answer about the messages, does it really matter if it's Arcturian, Pleiadian, or whatever label we'll put on it, or maybe it does? I'm just curious what you think, Matthew.
For me, I tried not to get mashed up in that minutia because
Yeah.
I personally, I don't feel like it matters. I mean, a lot of people want to say Pleiadians this, Arcturians that, but
Yeah.
I think it's all the same thing, and we all
Yeah.
just need to take a deep breath and
Yeah.
not necessarily label things like that. Because
I
I think,
agree. I don't think it
yeah,
matters because I don't think we really know. We get impressions and it may be this or that, and then what
yeah.
level of Arcturian and all that. So did you get a message from the blue lady at all? Any other message?
No. So, at the end of this experience, I did have this final ending to the initiation. I was in this
Oh.
temple, and there were these 5 white light beings that radiated white light standing in front of me, and they were flanked by these blue beings on either side. And one of the white light guys stepped forward, and he told me, that this is my new mission and purpose. And that
What was your? Oh.
so he told me that I was, to basically act as a shepherd of men,
Hmm.
and that this was my new mission and purpose, and
Hmm.
that that this life I have now does not belong to me; it belongs to the human race.
Hmm.
So,
Wow.
so that's what I'm doing. I'm trying
Wow.
to bring all of this out and talk to people about it and talk about consciousness and the psychology of everything and how it all fits in with mythology and everything. So, yeah.
Maybe you could come up to Sedona on May 2nd and just say a few words about that at this book event that I'm doing.
Yeah, sure. I'd be delighted. Yeah.
All right. I'll send you some information about that.
Okay.
One more question. Is it just some ETs are much more spiritual? So that is so important. It is just that Carol says it's just some ETs are more spiritual. And that might be true, but who knows what to call them,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
so
I think in the past we've always called them, angels, we've called them the gods, we've called them, demons. Now we call them aliens. I kind of feel like I don't like to put them in a box of any of that because there's so much more than just that,
yeah, but there is more of, I feel, and maybe Mary does, there's more to the cosmos than just this little island in
Yeah.
space. And
Right, yeah. Yeah, and that's why I don't like putting things in boxes like that, because I think when you put it in a box in your own mind, you're limiting that thing to just this, and maybe it doesn't necessarily fit in that box, to be honest.
Yeah, because there are no. Yeah, Mary. Yes.
Yeah,
Mary.
we've all been all different things. I've just been told for 50 years in doing meditation and when I was running about the Pleiadians, everyone has their own spiritual guides and gifts that they, you know, that they are working with. So I'm not trying to put it in a box. They've been talking to me for on and off my whole life. It's all wonderful. Whoever we got connected with, that we chose to come in with in our family and our ascension here. So yeah, whatever is helping us ascend our frequency and shift our DNA so we can be the highest form of ourselves to do what we're supposed to do here is bring it on. I wasn't trying to mean something.
No, I know. I just thought some people get some people get caught up in Pleiadian Syrians, and I think no one. I know, but some people do.
Hearing them and Syrian.
No, I
just want to clarify that I'm not trying to like name drop.
No, I know.
Everyone has their own experiences, and I know. All honorable to us all. That's all.
No, thank you. So, your mission then, Matthew, is to do what? What are you doing like from here on out? I mean, what are you doing? I mean,
so now I'm going to start. I've actually already started it, but I haven't been working on it religiously like I should be. But my next book is going to be talking about how I got to this point in my life and kind of the psychology that will get you there, and just more of that. I want to give people something that they can digest and apply to their own lives in a way that will make this happen for them. And that's what I want to do, because ultimately it's all about psychology, you know, and these hard boundaries that we put up, and that this is real and that's not real. And I just want to help people get past those things.
Right. David, anything you want to comment about here that you've heard tonight?
I just want to thank Matthew for sharing, and it was really exciting to hear, you know, about your experience. I wasn't familiar with it, to be honest. I'd seen your book, and I'd actually been looking up Jess Taylor's book, The Voice, you know, and I ran across your page, and I was like, oh wow, this is kind of, there's some resonance there, you know, but I didn't know everything that you've brought out tonight in that. So I'm going to pick up your book, and I'm excited to.
Can I ask you? I'm just curious. How did you hear about Jess Taylor's book?
I actually met Jess. So,
you have? Okay.
Yeah. And when I met her, it was before she wrote the book, and
okay.
She was pretty potent, and it was an.
What is the book, David? Can you talk about the book?
Yeah, it's Jess Taylor, The Voice. Is it Diary of a Divine Intervention Agent or something like that?
It's Case Files of a Divine Intervention Agent. Yeah. It's a very good book. I love it.
And what was interesting to me about reading it, and which was what keyed me into your work as much as I did before tonight, was the fact that I met her prior to that book. And when I met her, I was like, whoa, okay, like she's got some presence. Yeah. And then when I read and then when I read the book, I was like, oh, okay. Like, you know, I'm like reading all these things that I had kind of like said, and I had some other people that were with me in that. I was like, well, this happened and this, and she can do this and whatever. And so reading the book, I was like, oh, wow, like here she's laying this out, you know, and it's everything that I had kind of like read off that experience. So
what can she do, or what happened?
Yeah.
Well, it's real similar to what Matthew's been talking about. You know, she had these, outside of the fact that she's had her initiation into this actually had stigmata involved in it a couple of times. She had spontaneous near-death experiences that like took her completely out, where she was hospitalized. She just went into a fugue state and had to be hospitalized because she couldn't feed herself and couldn't do anything. But in the process of this kind of terrifying experience, she has gained this this way of living where she has, almost a guy, I mean, the voice, which is the title of the book, which tells her, hey, you're going to meet, she gives an example of a guy with a red hat in a bookstore, I think is one of the first ones. And, you're going to meet this guy with a red hat in a bookstore. And what you need to do is you need to go stand there and wait for him to show up. And when he shows up, he's going to be suicidal. And you need to just kind of tell him X, Y, Z. Right. So she goes to the bookstore and nobody's there. And she's like, okay, this feels kind of weird. And the voice is like, I'm training you in how to live and how to experience this way of viewing. And the guy shows up with a red hat and he's crying and he's suicidal and just gives the message. And, the guy's like, oh, okay. It helps him. And so this is how she lives her life now. And that's the idea of the divine intervention agent, is this voice basically gives her missions where she goes out and just, lives this very spontaneous, almost Zen way of living, helping people, which is really similar, I think, to what you're talking about, Matthew, of this mission to kind of bring people to this other way of being,
Well, didn't you mention something about that in your initial talk with Roderick that helped you, that book? Right, Matthew?
Oh, the voice?
Yeah. Wasn't there something?
Actually, so it came out on the same day my book came out, oddly enough. we published on the same day. And I came across it obviously after I had published my book. Otherwise I would have mentioned it, because it is just a wonderful book. I love it. Because, what drew me to it was the fact that she talks about this voice, which is something that I hear too. My voice obviously doesn't give me directions like hers, but that's just because I have a different mission. And I think that all of us have these different missions that get initiated. And hers just happens to be, on a daily basis, she's sent to go meet people that are having trouble, and to help them.
Wow. Imagine if the whole world lived that way.
I know. It would be, this place would be entirely different. It would be such a wonderful world, really.
Well, I think we're coming into that. I mean, you're doing your mission. You're following your guidance now, right? I mean, that's...
Yeah, absolutely.
And so thank you, David, for sharing that. Mary, anything you want to say before we sign off?
No, but just thank you all for sharing. And we're all doing our mission right now. I mean, I was told, I've known I'm going to work with kids and really inspire kids to work with their parents to communicate better, because I couldn't get that as a child. And I've been waiting to do this book, for 70
years. Show your book again. Show yours and Barbara Lamb's book.
Yeah, Barbara, E.T. Friends in Space. And it's stories of positive experiences other than some of the ones we've all had that sort of tell the story of different ETs and different things that they learn in a positive way from different experiences that they've had with ETs, American human kids and ETs that they've learned over the decade.
And when is that due out?
Soon, next month. It's being printed right now, so it should be out pretty soon. We're waiting for it. Thank you.
Great. And we'll find that on Amazon. Where will we find it?
Yep, everywhere. I'm working on it.
What's it called again? ETs in Space?
Kids Adventures with ET Friends in Space.
Kids Adventure. Okay, great. Look at that. Mary Edwards and Barbara Lamb, who's been on this program. And Roderick, what are you up to? Because you play a key role in kind of gathering people together, which is very exciting. You're muted.
I'm not really. I was just faking.
Oh, you are a joker.
I'm working on my acting skills someday, right?
No, that's good. I appreciate your humor, even though.
Well, I'm just enjoying life,
No, I know you are. You're coming into your potential, but talk about Clubhouse a little bit.
Okay. Clubhouse is a drop-in app where you could go and listen to just about anything you want. However, we do have a club there called Extraterrestrial Evidence, where Matthew was a guest there. Alan's always there. Mary is there. So the whole family is there, and another 11,000 other people. That's part of our club. And every Tuesday and Thursday, I do kind of host an event there where people get on and we just talk about different things. But if you're an Android user, I think next month it opens up to Android people, and so therefore everybody can hop on. But if not, if you've not heard about Clubhouse, Google it, YouTube some videos. It's one of the best things out there, especially if you got a message and you want to be heard. Anyone can tell their message and resonate. And we've created a safe place on our club where people can share their experiences, no ridicule, no, just it's just there. And we're all believers in just sharing each other's experience. So a great place.
That is Tuesdays and Thursdays, Extraterrestrial Evidence on Club.
8:30 Central Time. Yes, Tuesdays and Thursday. And I will start a Sunday pretty soon. But yeah, Tuesdays and Thursdays.
And we're going to make my book a bestseller. Hold up that book for a second.
Okay.
There it is.
There's the book.
And there's Making Contact. That's out May 4th. You can go to Amazon and order that. And you can also show Matthew's. Yeah, thank you. Beautiful. And Matthew's book there. Yes. You're that woman that comes out and points to the curtain on Let's Make a Deal.
No, not the woman.
No, you're not the woman, but
I'm the one in the back when she comes off stage and say, "You did a good job, honey."
Yeah. No, but show yeah. Now you got a book of Mary. You got beautiful book, Mary. That is really nice. Yeah. Great. And show Matthew's initiated. That is all the books. Very nice. Great. Who published your book, Matthew?
I did self-publish through Amazon.
Oh, great. You have another book coming out, and
this book is thick. It's like 400 pages. At least almost 2 inch. I mean.
Well, great. And before I go,
make sure you got your degree and went to school before you get this book. If not, lift from weights. Either or, because he has a story in here.
Yeah, you do have a story. And where's your Spotify interview you did with Matthew? Because that's much more.
It'll be on actually tonight. It'll be loaded up on Spotify. You just go to Extraterrestrial Evidence, and you'll be able to hear the entire interview in about a couple of hours. It's actually up. It's just slated to come out in a few hours.
All right. And before we go, I just want to promote this event that's coming up. Do you see this? This is my book launch, May 2nd in Sedona. If you're anywhere in Sedona, come to the Making Contact book launch. And Travis Walton, probably the most well-known abductee in the world, is going to be speaking there, along with JJ and Desiree Hurtak, me, Mark Sims from, he started the Harmonic Convergence, Bridget Nelson, who talks all about her hybrid children. You know Bridget, right, Mary?
I haven't met her yet, but she's amazing. I can't wait to meet her someday.
Right. And Peter Sterling
did a review for us, which was nice.
That's right. And Peter Sterling on harp. And then afterwards, we're all going to go out and maybe Matthew will come and say a few words just about his experience. I like that. And it's at the Unity Church in Sedona. So May 2nd this year, you can get a copy of the book. And then in the evening, we'll all go out with Mark Sims going to lead a CE5. And we're going to have Travis there as a beacon for those beings and Bridget maybe, and me and JJ to really tune into this next level, letting those veils down and waking up. So I think it's going to be a really, really fun event. Music, refreshments, speakers, gatherings, parties, anything you want in Sedona. So thank you, everyone here and everyone on my YouTube channel. Sometimes, we get a bunch of people. I don't know. I can't read all the comments, but there's some great people commenting on tonight's talk. And thank you, Matthew, for your time, because it's quite serious what you went through. It was not It's not just a walk in the park.
No, it wasn't. But thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. This has been a wonderful talk.
It's been fun. And, you know, I know it's hard to come forward because you're kind of new to it, but you've been so open and vulnerable and just sincere about what's happened to you. So I think more people need to do this because this is what's going to wake up the world.
Yes, absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
All right. So come back. I'll be in touch on email. Thank you, Mary, for everything and all the, I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with mentioning Pleiadians, you know, it's just that, or all that, it's all great. It's just that for me, Pleiadians might mean something different than you or Arcturians or, you know, it's hard to categorize something so undefined in my experience, right?
I'm coming out of the closet recently too, so I'm not going to ever bring that up. That's really helpful advice. It's stupid.
No, you could bring it up. I just don't.
Thank you. No, it's true. It doesn't mean anything. It
just doesn't mean any. It might mean somebody. It might mean something to somebody who's related to, who's had those experiences. I'm not saying you shouldn't. I just don't know how to relate to it. Do you know?
I'm taking that at heart too. So
all right. I mean, I mean, it's not about like saying tell you to say something different. I'm just telling you, I want to relate to the phenomenon somehow. And maybe when I meet the Pleiadians, I'll say, yep, those Pleiadians are right here. So
I'll bring it up in a different way. I appreciate that though, because we can help each other along the way. So thank you very much.
Yeah. So and thank you everyone. I'm Alan Steinfeld for New Realities. See us on Clubhouse or listen to us Clubhouse Tuesdays and Thursdays, here every Wednesday. And Matthew, look for Matthew's book, Initiated. That is a great, because you're so right. And one thing I learned from this discussion, Matthew, is that mythic, psychological ETs, there's an aspect where all of that is real and palpable, and they're not just stories. There's something that impacts us in a very tangible way, I guess I have to say. We live actually by certain myths, and the myths we live by actually dictate our reality until we, you know, choose a different one by having been thrust upon us, or by, you know, opening up to new realities. I guess that's the way. So thanks, Matthew. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, everyone online, and see you next week. Okay.